Welcome to another episode of the Power Law Investor. Today is October 14th, 2024, a Monday. Again, the contents here are not financial advice, it's only for informational purposes. And today we'll be discussing the weekly DCA that we've been doing, or the daily DCA that we've been doing into Power Law assets, talk about how that is proceeding, and in particular about CASPA and some of the potential scenarios that I see. So today, Bitcoin is trading just a little bit below 66,000 and CASPA is trading a little below 14 cents. We've seen quite a lot of volatility, upward movement in Bitcoin down from about the 60,000s or so to the 65. So it seems to be going up with some momentum. And the current allocation based on these values, the values here are a little different from what's showing in real time because these values update only once a day, is that we are looking at about a 61% allocation to CASPA, a 19% allocation to Bitcoin, and a 20% allocation to cash. So this algorithm, the triangle algorithm, moves between CASPA, Bitcoin, and cash, dynamically just to the expected return and the confidence that we have in those. And based on that, we put in $100 a day, which is what we've been doing since the 19th of August. Till now, we've invested about 6,000-ish or $5,600 over here. We are currently trading with a 8.75 loss in the low value. The average price per CASPA paid is about 15 and a quarter cents. The average price per Bitcoin paid is around 60,500. And you can see that we've had some limit orders that have also kicked in, utilizing some of this cash, this 20% cash that we have over here. And that has resulted in buying some additional CASPA into these points. That's how we can get those numbers. So as a reminder, the power law is just the trend line of the price data relative to time in the log space. So we take a log in the x-axis, which is the time since genesis of that particular crypto. Then we take a log of the price in the y-axis. And then you can see the price here in the blue is represented very well by this red or orange trend line and gives us an R squared fit for Bitcoin of 0.9959, which is very good, which means more than 95% of the variation in price is explained by this line. And then we convert this into a curve, and we can say, we convert this into the linear plane. And when we do that, these straight lines become curves. And based on that, assuming that the future is like the past, we can come up with the expected returns 1 year out and how much below the trend line we are. So currently for Bitcoin, we're about 20% below the trend line, and our annual return in 2025 1014 is going to be about 75% or so. Now there are only two assets that follow such a power law so closely with an R squared fit of greater than 0.90 in my knowledge, and that's Bitcoin over here. And then similarly, we have something for CASPA, and we have a fewer number of days for CASPA, 867 versus over 5,000. But we see that the R squared fit is also very well represented. And when we do the similar calculations for CASPA, we end up with an expected return of north of 600% in a year's time. And that is amplified by the fact that we are trading way below this orange trend line right now. And yeah, let's get into the analysis a little bit. And we jump into some more details around CASPA as we go forward. In the case of Bitcoin, we are again, like I said earlier, we're looking at about 76% returns annually. If you just adopt the simplest version of the power law over here, you'll see that we're about here at 62,500 based on the updates a day ago on the algorithm. And our target price around this point is going to be almost in the mid 70s, upper 70s or so. So Bitcoin tends to follow, and many of these assets are periodic. And just the purpose of the trend line is not saying that we'll be on the trend line all the time. It means that that's where we trend to over time. So give us enough time and we'll end up there. But right now we're trading below that trend line. And so one of the things I'd like to sort of point out is that when we are using Bitcoin as the granddaddy, the king of the cryptocurrencies, there's a tendency that it could also drop down below to the minus 40 or even minus 50% trend line. Those are what would be called the support lines. It generally doesn't go much below that. For Bitcoin, it goes to about minus 60. For Casper in the past, it's gone to about minus 50, although that has recently been broken. And so there's always the caveat here that, yeah, while there's a lot of momentum and there's a lot of excitement when we look at, the price action of Bitcoin over the last few days, for example, you can see that it's just shooting upwards all the way from a downward 59 to about 65 and a half now. There is a possibility that it could roll down. And that's one of the reasons, if it did fall down significantly, that we have these cash reserves that we're generating. And these cash reserves are here for the cash reserves. So 20% of what we're putting in every day. Every day we're putting in $100. So 20% of that goes to cash, as you can see based on this algorithm over here. And what this allows us to do is, if we do get opportunities to buy these assets at significant discounts, we have cash available, because the worst feeling is to know something's on a sale and you run out of money. All right. So I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that Bitcoin could take another leg down. It seems that it has some upward momentum, but we just don't know. And it's always good to have resources, to be prudent, to be able to deploy those resources where we're able to get in that sort of situation. Now let's shift on to Casper, which is where a lot more of the interest is, because Casper currently, if you look at this graph, has dropped way below the minus 50% trend line, which is this green line over here, which is about 0.143 right now, and it's trading about a whole cent below that. So call it maybe about 8% or so below that minus 50% trend line, and it is way below the orange line trend line. And so the questions we have to ask ourselves is, do we think that the power law trend line has been broken? Is this a buying opportunity? Is this telling us that we should get out? And everyone has to make their own assessments. And I made a previous video. You can just go to my channel and find that, about what I think the situation is. But the synopsis is that I feel, again, I can't give you a quantitative estimate on this, is that looking at the amount of evidence that we have, this is likely to be a minor perturbation or a major perturbation in the path of Casper, but it is likely to go back to the trend line, because if you look at all the data, we still have an excellent R-squared fit, and we haven't seen prices crash to sort of crazy values like 5 cents or something, which would indicate that the power law has sort of broken substantially. And so right now, the returns that we can get are about 600% or so, which is just fantastic, assuming it comes back to that trend line. The things that I would sort of point out are that we've already deployed some of the cash that I had in reserve at 14 cents and then at 13 cents. But we really don't know what's going to happen and how long it might take to stabilize or come back to the trend line. And I think the other caveat too, so first there's the time, assuming everything else stays the same, how long will it be before Casper gets back to its trend line? The other thing to realize is what's happening with, what might happen with Bitcoin. Everyone's been talking about these interest rate cuts and so forth, but in 2019, we had the interest rate cuts, and then Bitcoin dropped quite a bit, even before the craziness of the pandemic hit. So if that's the case, and if we see something similar this time, it wasn't until quantitative easing really hits in, which is different from cutting rates, right? And so right now, we're at this point over here. We've had the rate cuts, we've had some upward action. Maybe it goes down, maybe it goes up. I can't give you a definitive assessment of which way it's going to go, because I don't know. No one knows. And if anyone tells you that they know, they don't know. But what we are doing is we're buying a daily amount of $100 put into the cash and the Bitcoin position and the Casper position. But the key point that I want to make is that if Bitcoin does go down, then it is likely going to drag Casper down also with it, and just take the entire market down. So even though Casper might have a tendency to go up, all else being equal, if Bitcoin comes down, it's going to pull everything down with its gravitational pull. So you may have even better deals coming up ahead. We just don't know as yet. So in order to guard against that, we want to have some amount of cash reserves available. And the other thing to be sort of cautious about is, of course, that relative to Bitcoin, Casper has been underperforming. This is the Casper Bitcoin ratio. So the higher this number becomes, the better Casper is doing relative to Bitcoin. Like I said in my video, it's not an unheard of amount of drop from here to here, whereas previously it dropped all the way from here to here. We can use the measuring tool. say like, oh, before we had dropped down almost 44%. Now, or this previously we dropped down about 35%. Now we've dropped down, say about 30% here. And if you take it from the top over here, we've dropped down to about 32%, right? So this is not unheard of, but it, who knows how long this thing could continue for. And you can make an assessment like, oh, is the amount of time between this and this, how much time did we spend? Well, this is from end of February to June, so that's 4 months or so. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. We just don't know. So that's something to be careful of. And also relative to the altcoin market also, this is the Casper market cap divided by the total 3, which is the cryptocurrency market cap minus Bitcoin minus Ethereum, and then minus these two major stables. And you can see relative to the other parts of the market, Casper is underperforming. Although right around here, you can see that Casper started to hold its own over here a little bit, right? So maybe that's the bottom, maybe it isn't. So again, keeping all the caveats in mind and just realizing that we don't know what's going to happen in the future, the best opportunity will be to continue to DCA in on a daily basis. Right now, the price is, about 13.5 cents. Let's just check where it is as we speak. It's almost 14 cents. Still a decent buying opportunity. I do have a limit order set at 12.07 for a big chunk of the remaining cash. It might get down there if Bitcoin goes down. We just don't know. But in the meantime, we continue to DCA in, following this triangle, $100 allocated in these 3 ways. And that allows us to keep enough skin in the game, but at the same time, have some reserve to be able to get better prices. Now, one thing I'd like to point out is that I've added this new column, which is telling you what the average price paid for Bitcoin and Caspa is, right? So taking into account all the different purchases that we made, the average buying price is around just above 15.25 cents for Caspa, and now it's trading at 13. I think one way to consider if you want to really try and amp up your aims, instead of having this 20% that we have going to cash, you might put a bigger allocation of 40%, right? The advantage of that is that you end up buying more when the price is low if you have the courage to make those sorts of calls, which using the power law mathematics, you kind of get an idea where you should be and if it's a good deal or not. But the flip side is you might not get that. And I personally think that if I had to do it again, of course, I know what's happened now, so it's not exactly a fair apples to apples comparison. But I think there's a lot of opportunity given the volatility in crypto to be able to buy when the price goes down. And we always have this fear and greed sort of balancing out between us, right? When the price goes up, we get greedy, like, oh, I don't have enough. But when the price is going down, we get fearful. Oh, I don't want to buy it right now. Maybe it goes down further. I think I would err on the fact, given that there's so much more volatility, that you'll always get a good buying opportunity sooner or later if you're patient. So I would probably, if I were to redesign this algorithm for this experiment, we'll continue doing the algorithm as is, I would probably allocate a higher proportion to cash, maybe 30, 40%. Because when the price is low, that's when you want to hit it, and you want to hit it as hard as you possibly can, right? Because that's where you're going to make the biggest gains. So that might be, that might be a minor improvement that I would do, but in respect to that, I would just point to what the expected returns of Caspa are at current levels, about 600%. So, whether you buy it at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 is not really going to make that much of a difference in the long term. The biggest thing is, do you have enough conviction that it's following the power law? And if you do, that's where the big gains are going to be made, holding it for about the next year or so. So that's where we are right now. If you like the content, please do like and subscribe. And if you have some questions, please put some comments below, and I'll try and answer them when I get the chance. So all the best, and thanks for listening.